and
God,
have been
no.
threatened. Yeah,
Oh
but
God.
in those situations, what happens is we do have a team and we do have codes within the agency where you say a certain word or you use a certain code or you go through the speaker, the PA, and if you say a certain word, we know that there is a danger. Um, Especially for this client that I had that was very aggressive and verbally threatening to me. Every time he came in, he had to check in with security, and then I had to the room that I used, it was one of our safest rooms, and I had to alert the people around me like, hey, my client that's a little bit dangerous is coming in, and we had codes. If I was in danger, they would be there in seconds. But it
Okay.
was a kind of team effort, and I would never see them in the field. If it was somebody that was in psychosis or had schizophrenia or were threatening, we would see them in the office, and we had a team around us ready to go if needed.
Right, right, right. But you are also like evaluating complex cases of like when you should break privilege, right? When you should reveal
Yes,
certain information to
and
like, okay.
I have very like a lot of times because a client will disclose that they were sexually abused or physically abused or that their parents were using substance in front of them, and I had to call DCFS in the spot to have the client removed from the home. Couldn't wait, and I even told we have a whole speech where, hey, just so you know, this is where the confidentiality has limits, and I have to break confidentiality. I have to call and I have to remove you from the home. And they knew that. I mean, we were very transparent from the beginning. If you ever report that somebody's hurting you, threatening to hurt you, you're hurting someone else, threatening to hurt someone else, we will break confidentiality and we will have to report. So that was stated in the first session. And I had to do that a few times. I had to call DCFS a few times and stay with the client until they came to remove the client from the home.
Right, right, right. I understand. Okay. Uh, okay. So do you see the next question?
Yes.
What
What
kind of
kind of
HR work problems did you encounter? Like you said, confer with program manager concerning a human resource and work problems. So I don't understand what kinds of problems these are.
Where did I get that from? That's interesting. What I did with my staff is a lot of my staff had medical problems or personal problems or school schedules that they needed to work with. So I had to work with HR to make sure that we can accommodate those schedules and those, especially the working conditions. So I, and again, have to keep the confidentiality of the staff. And I mean, some of them went through some loss, and then I would connect them with the employee assistance program, which is, again, their own therapy and stuff like that. Sometimes they would go on medical leaves, and I had to figure out a way to spread out their duties to the other QAs to make sure the work is getting done. So it was that kind of working with HR, and then the payroll side of things. If there was discrepancies with their hours or their pay in that capacity. I don't know why I put that there now that I'm saying it.
All right. So did you emotionally support your peers as well? Like provide emotional support for them, like
Yes,
say.
there was one that had really heavy medical problems and another one that went through a miscarriage that, again, it was just me staying with them and making sure they're okay and they're safe and then connecting them with their own therapy because, I can't be their therapist.
Okay, right, right, right. And like this is also like a pretty stressful job, like the one that you're in, like dealing with these angsty teenagers and kids, right? So
Yeah.
so how exactly and so you must have like provided a lot of like emotional support to like your peers regarding this, like regarding the cases you just told me about, like someone threatening your life, right? So
Yeah.
like you must have provided emotional support to other people regarding like other complex cases that you might be having. Did you do that?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did you help align resources with social program needs and optimize resource utilization? Okay, like you said, like you weren't involved that much in improving programs, so let's skip
No.
this one. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, assist in planning, developing, and implementing mandatory and discretionary mental health programs. Okay, so you developed a mental health program. Could you please tell me about this? Elaborate this in terms of like what was the challenge that the organization was facing, what was the strategy you used, and what was the result of this or impact?
It was mainly how to we're contracted through DMH. So they kind of tell us what documents we have to use and the language we have to use in order for these notes and these progress the paperwork to be billable. So in order for us to get um, funding from the state and coverage through Medi-Cal, we have to be in compliance with their rules and regulations and their policies. So a lot of times, we come in and we're training the new hires and we're training current staff. Hey, now DMH wants us to do this other paperwork, and now we're going to change the game on you. Instead of doing this form, you're doing this form. Instead of submitting this note, you're submitting that form. That was really hard for everybody to readjust because you train them on one thing and then you're saying, just kidding, now you're doing this other thing. And it's a constant change. It's
Okay.
almost monthly every time that they want a new form. So I was helping them figure out the best way to implement the new requirements from the state in as little inconvenience as possible. So even though, yes, it's a new form, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into XM, which is the software that we use, and I'm going to remove the old form for you. Instead of, keeping all these forms and you're trying to figure out what to use next, what, is this correct? Is that correct? I'm just going to eliminate what we don't use anymore and then just keep what we do use. So you don't accidentally use the wrong form. So it was a lot of that, helping them understand that, yes, it's annoying. Yes, it's another hassle, another new form to learn and to use, but it's a just helping them narrow down the stress or eliminating the stress of having to remember what to use and how to use it. These forms can be very complex because it's like a blank template, and then you have to remember to put in what you need to put in, like the information that's necessary. So what we did is, again, working closely with XM, is we would do like an outline, like, just kind of like bullet points, reminding them, don't forget to write this, don't forget to write that, and just narrowing it down and giving them a more sustainable template so they're not forgetting to say and do certain things in the note. I don't know if that
Right,
makes sense.
like a checklist, right? Like a checklist. So
Yes,
like
yes. Oh my God. We did a checklist for absolutely everything. So it was a hard copy checklist of don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, and in email blasts, bulletins, stuff like that. But very, very, very heavy on checklists and constantly revising those checklists.
okay, I see, I see. All right. I suppose we are done with this. And this just yeah, this just help people with the like remembering these like very changing regulations, right? Developing these checklists.
Yeah. So, and it also helped them stay in compliance with their audit. So if we kind of got to them from the beginning, then once they got to an audit, it would be less work to do because they were already implementing the changes.
Right, I understand. Okay. Uh, marriage and family. Okay. Keep informed of new. Okay, so do you see the next question over here?
Yes.
Okay, so
Hmm.
do you have anything for that? Do you opt to adopt, utilize these
Um,
new developments? Mm.
so just that, we did a lot of in-service trainings, which means we contracted other agencies to come in and teach us new tools, new interventions, new coping
No, no, no.
skills that we
This is
can.
not this. Excuse me, Rosanna. This is not the staff training question. This is the question above that. Did you utilize these new developments to improve therapy practices? You said you keep informed of new developments in the field of psychiatric social work in marriage or
Yeah,
family therapy. So,
yeah.
based on this, so did you use this new information to like improve like current therapy practices?
Yes. So with those trainings, we would then use what we learned to work with our clients. So it's almost like they were training us to then implement the work. Is that what you're
Okay.
asking?
No, no, no. Like you said that you keep informed of new developments in the field of psychiatric social work or marriage
Yeah.
and family therapy, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
uh, what does this entail exactly? I don't understand this bullet. Like, what does this entail exactly?
So I think I do understand the question, but it's pretty much if like I would go to different trainings. to then
Mhm.
utilize it with our new hires and our staff and our clients. So
Oh,
it's keeping up to date with the newest interventions and evidence based practices in the field, internally or externally. I would go to different trainings like provided by the Department of Mental Health or DCFS or other agencies in the area that they were using, so we can also adopt and use in our agency.
right. Evidence-based practices for marriage and family therapy and psychiatric social work. What about with children? Like, uh, uh, did you learn new therapy practices for like child care, like child psychotherapy?
Yeah, so that's all encompassing both. So it's infants, children, adolescents, adults. That's all encompassing. So it wasn't just one particular population. It's one particular intervention that you can use with all populations.
Right. And once you learn these new like evidence-based therapy practices, were you the one who like helped implement these new practices within your own organization?
Yes, through training. So again, it was all through training. So I would go to a training and then bring back what I learned to do like a PowerPoint training, like a brief hey, this is what's going on. You guys can join that training or you can use these resources to kind of like do it yourself kind of training. So it was just again picking up information, bringing it back to the agency and dispersing it.
Wow, that is awesome. Okay. Now I understand that fully. Thank you very much for like explaining that.
Yeah.
All right. Identify staff training and development requirements. So
Mhm.
over here, I wanted to ask, how did you train them? We already answered that. PowerPoint presentations and resources.
Yeah.
Uh, what did you guide train them on? Exactly, we already answered that too. Evidence-based therapy practices and stuff like that, right?
So it was different departments too. It wasn't just the therapist. It was new hires. It was the QAs. It was the therapeutic behavior workers. It was the case managers. It was across all sites through all staff. It was just different trainings. Either I would pull up XM, the software that we use, and kind of navigate it for them, and just really give them a visual guide. Like this is where you click. This is what you see. This is where stuff is kept, and then through PowerPoint. So it was mainly both. And then sometimes I would shoot out an email for like it's a bulletin, like we'd call it the bulletin of like updated information, what's new this month, what's changing, and it was almost like a synopsis to what the training that's coming it was going to be about. So it's like, hey, just this month we're going to talk about this, and this is the day and time of the training.
Okay, all right, I understand. After this, a few bullets below this, it's like you've written something, review and approve treatment authorization requests from hospitals. Did you coordinate with hospitals over here, like for this
Yeah,
treatment?
so sometimes we would get a case that came in with an assessment. So it was a current assessment, which means we have to do an assessment every 3 years. It's a full assessment every 3 years. But if a client was referred through us through a hospital, so what normally would happen is, let's say a client was suicidal, attempted suicide, or hurting themselves, and they were hospitalized, and they didn't have a therapist yet. So then the hospital would then refer the client to the next available agency or the closest available agency to the client, and then we would get their assessments and their paperwork. We will review them to see if it was in compliance with our standards, and if it wasn't, we would do our own to
Mhm.
kind of be in compliance. And if it was, we would keep it and work with the doctors and the social workers in the case in order to provide the services. So we were contracted again through the state, and we have to stay in compliance. So regardless if a client comes in with another assessment, if it wasn't up to our standards, we just wouldn't take it. But we would obviously take the client and reevaluate ourselves.
Right. So, like you essentially manage these, how shall I put it? Like, uh, these
The
referrals from
referrals.
hospitals,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
so these
So
referrals from hospitals, so you essentially process them, right?
right. So we would again, everyone was accepted, but the paperwork might have not been accepted depending on how it was completed. But yeah,
Right.
once the referral came in, then I would decide. okay, we're going to do like an addendum or a reassessment or a full assessment, and then I would tell our intake department we can accept this documentation. It's good enough. It's in compliance. Or I would say I'm not going to take this documentation, but we're going to do a new one. And this is like I would guide the intake department in letting the therapist know what type of assessment they had to complete,
Right, right,
if
right.
any.
Okay, do you see these bullets 1 to 9?
Yes.
There are a couple, yeah. So we'll discuss them like, okay, all right. I don't think we need to discuss that. We don't need, okay. All right. So we'll discuss them, these with regards to your occupational therapist role. All right.
Mhm.
All right. So did you help patients, children, adolescents with, so I'm going to go through each bullet, and if you have any additional thing to say, any additional like idea other than things we talked about, like, do tell me. All right.
Mhm. Mhm.
So any initiative or any incident. So help patients, children, adolescents with complex psychosocial needs reach recovery goals. So like we already talked about a lot
Mhm.
of that, right? So
Yeah, and I did have a lot of successful discharges. The most the client was the longest the client was with me was 2 years, and the least amount of time was 8 months. But I we would only discharge when either they were going to be transferred to another agency for higher level of care, or they were ready because they met their goals.
right, 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 right. Okay. And do you have a like a number, like how many people you helped meet their goals, like
Oh, I
exactly?
don't know. I really don't
Okay.
know. I mean, I've had so many clients in the last 3 years. I don't know.
Oh, I understand completely. All right. And we already talked about a case where someone was trying to commit suicide, and like you had to call people to see like
Mhm.
if he's all right. So could you you mentioned these PAT teams that you had to call and see like if the person was all right. Like what are these teams exactly?
It's called a SMART team. There's like three acronyms. There's a few of them. It's the SMART team, it's the PET team, and it's the PMRT team. I mean, they're psychiatric emergency response teams.
Mhm.
That's the PET team, but it's again whoever picks up. It's you call the crisis hotline, and again the three agencies that serve the Los Angeles County. You call like the one that's going to pick up, but the cool thing about those three agencies is that they work together. So if one of them doesn't pick up, you automatically get routed to the next available one. Either way, you're going to get somebody that picks up. So we worked with whoever picked up, and then they would go out and assess the client, and they would call the cops too to kind of make it an emergency. And so it was those teams work closely with the police station in the area where the client was in
Right,
order to get there faster. So it was a whole team that went out to assess the client and then hospitalize the client while I was on the
right,
phone until they were safe.
right, right, right. Okay, that's nice. And with these issues where like if with these psychotherapy cases where you have where you have patients who are like children and adolescents, there are
Mm-hmm.
times where like the patients and adolescents, they develop like attachments to like the counselor,
Yes.
right? So you
Yes.
have to be careful while terminating care.
Yeah.
So how did
Yeah.
you do that? Like what was the strategy for terminating care?
Well, it's a lot of supervision. I had supervision, individual supervision once a week, more if necessary, and then group supervision once a week for 2 hours, more if necessary. But it was a lot. It was just setting the boundaries. And I mean, I'm of course I'm human. Like there were some clients that were attached, and I had a soft spot for them. It was really hard for me to not get